Once the lobster has been drawn out and outlined, or at least had the lines made a uniform level of darkness, in each shape of the lobster, you're going to create different word art, icon illustrations, scenes, patterns, and designs that are inspired by Maine. So think about that Maine idea boot camp that we did right before this project. You are not allowed to just color a shape in a solid color. That is not a design. You can, for example, fill your space with an icon illustration and then color in the background. Likewise, you could color in word art. So for example, in my lobster, I could draw a lighthouse inspired design. So I'm drawing in this big shape in the middle of the lobster's body, keeping my lines nice and light and sketchy. It doesn't have to be exactly like the illustrations that you made in your boot camp, but if you don't have any ideas at all, that's not a terrible place to start with making illustrations you've already experimented with in that boot camp activity. You can look up references, but you are not allowed to trace things. You can use a reference, certainly, but do not trace designs. So you want to fill the whole space. You don't want to just put one or two things in there. So if you're making a scene, scenes are pretty easy to use your space with, right? So you have a nice scene of a lighthouse, the ocean with the sun coming up. I would sketch the design first and then go back in and color it in. Let's say, for example, if I wanted to play around with icons. So I could make the tree icon from the boot camp activity in another section of the lobster. That's not really using my space well. I have a lot of empty space on either side. So I could create other icons so it starts to look more like a scene. I could put other designs on either side of it. So I could have put anchors, for example, or axes. So I'm just going to sketch my designs out and then go back and color them in. Let's say I want to make some word art. So a first example, right, I could write out the word Maine. I like to make my letters sketchy first, make sure they fit nicely. And then I can turn them into bubble or block letters by drawing around them. Make sure you're checking your spelling when you do make word illustrations. Nothing more embarrassing than putting all kinds of thought and detail into an illustration and then it's got a misspelling on it. Then I would outline this and color it in. Okay. So think about illustrations, designs, patterns in the really small areas of the lobster, like on the legs, right? Think about those patterns that we made. So if you're working with just a pattern, you could jump right into color like we did on the boot camp activity. You don't want to have patterns that are the same right next to each other, but you can reuse them as long as it's not overdoing it. So if I color the leg segment of my lobster in red, I can then take my black colored pencil and I can make the buffalo plaid stripes. So start with vertical lines. If you haven't done the Maine Idea boot camp yet, make sure you do that before you start the lobster. Those skills directly translate to this assignment, especially at the end where it requires you to branch off and come up with your own illustrations. So now I have a buffalo plaid section on my lobster. I could make other plaids for sure, so we have a lot of different plaid patterns that people wear in Maine. For camouflage, think about all the different clothing patterns that people wear. So if I make this green, contrasting stripes on it, so I could put thin red lines going vertically and horizontally, and then add in a third color, like blue. Make a thicker blue line next to every other red line. I'm going to add the lines just a little bit there. And do the same thing horizontally, and it looks like plaid. Okay, so come up with ideas. Fill this entire lobster with illustrations. Really take your time. It's a multi-day project. You have a lot of time to work on this, and the quality of your design should really reflect that you're taking time to work on this assignment.